Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up though, our spaces are filling up very quickly.
So fast forward to about 4 years ago when I was about 38 years old, eating that way for my entire life, I grew to about 400 pounds or so. I was morbidly obese. They told me I needed to eat 60 grams of carbs with each meal and at least 30 grams of carbs with every snack. And I'm supposed to snack throughout the day. Well, I'll always say that the healthiest food you can eat is eggs and beef. Before, when I was taking the industrial doses of insulin, go up from the Taco Bell and then you crash down. And that's when you eat the kitchen, you drink the gallon of orange juice, and then you go on a blood sugar roller coaster. I'm the most insulin sensitive I've ever been in my life. But when I was 400 pounds, I actually had double diabetes. All type 1 should be as lean and jacked as possible.
Hey everybody, welcome. We've got with us today Michael Fitzpatrick. He's going to share with us, I guess, a pretty interesting success story. So Michael, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I understand you're type 1 diabetic, which has its own unique challenges and issues, and you've done apparently a pretty good job in dealing with that. So I guess let's just start with your background. Tell us a little about yourself, maybe when you first became diagnosed and stuff like that.
Sure. Yep. So I was diagnosed back in 1997, about 27 years ago, at the age of 14. Okay. I'm about to turn 42 now. And all my life, I was pretty much going by the standard American diet, and my A1Cs were not really the best control. I was always in like the mid 6% or so. And in terms of diabetes control, that's a target that the ADA and most care teams set for type 1. So fast forward to about 4 years ago when I was about 38 years old, eating that way for my entire life, I grew to about 400 pounds or so. I was morbidly obese. My blood sugars were all over the place. I was having nightmare hypoglycemic seizures all the time, almost on a monthly basis, scaring the crap out of my family. The medics were over all the time. And of course, at the time we were going through COVID, this was about 2020, 2019 or so. And I said to myself, I can't keep going this way. I'm not going to make it to age 40 if I don't make serious changes. So one night, my daughter wanted to do something with me, and I physically wasn't able to do it just because I was in such bad shape. And it was at that moment when I told myself, I'm gonna get myself healthy. I'm gonna do everything in my power to lose the weight, to normalize my blood sugars, and to get healthy so I can be there for my family and to increase my health span. So after that, I basically learned as much as I could about nutrition. I started Googling low carb because I saw so many people were having great success with low carb, losing weight and managing their diabetes. I came across the video by one of your former guests, Artie Dykman. He had a diet doctor video, which actually absolutely blew my mind. And that really changed my perspective on how I view diabetes management. So I started to adopt a low carb, high fat. Low carb, high fat was really popular those days. I was doing the blood ketone testing. I did some fasting, and I combined that with a lot of cardio. I started walking around the block, and I managed to start losing a lot of weight.
Okay. Before we go too far into that, let me go back to you had diabetes for 20 or so years, 400 pounds, although your overall number is considered reasonable, probably the endocrinologist is like, oh, that's not bad. The fact that you're 400 pounds, the fact that you're having severe hypoglycemia, I assume you had pretty significant hyperglycemias coming in there too, and you're having to chase it with insulin all the time. Were they okay with that? Were they like, okay, let's just keep hitting the insulin? They never gave you dietary advice to change things?
They could care less. That was standard operating procedure for them. In fact, when they were happy with my A1C, they said I'm doing a fantastic job. And I was surprised actually when I was diagnosed with neuropathy in my feet with an A1C of like 6.3%. I was like, I'm hitting the target A1Cs, and you're telling me that I have these complications. I didn't think that was possible. So that was another light bulb moment for me.
And this is before CGMs, most of it, back up until about five years ago, they weren't really available that much at all. And so you're doing the finger sticks, I assume. And did you have a pump or anything like that, or were you just basal bolusing it? How did you manage?
I was doing MDI, multiple daily injections. It wasn't until after I started my health journey that I actually got a pump. So today I use a Tandem Control IQ pump, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Let me ask you about, so the advice that they gave you about nutrition was, here's a nurse diabetes educator, follow their food plan, count carbs, and just keep slamming both.
They told me I needed to eat 60 grams of carbs with each meal and at least 30 grams of carbs with every snack. And I'm supposed to snack throughout the day. Absolutely bonkers. Looking back on it now, I'm surprised I didn't die following that advice, and no wonder I was having roller coaster nightmare blood sugars all the time.
How many units of insulin were you using a day?
I was taking, I actually measured this throughout my journey. When I started, I was taking 210 units per day. Okay. And today I'm at about 40 units.
And weight back then was what? You said up to 400?
It was about 400 pounds, yeah.
Okay, yep. So per kilo, you're taking about 1 unit every kilo, and now I don't know what you weigh now. What do you weigh now?
Today, I'm a lean 253 pounds.
So you've reduced that.
I can see my abs, so it's all good.
So well less than half. Yeah, that's the fact you can see your abs coming from 400 pounds is also pretty amazing. So, exactly. So you get in there, you start looking at low carb, you see Dykman stuff, and probably may have saw Bernstein stuff, I imagine, because he's a big proponent of Richard Burns. I've interviewed. He's still kicking at 90, just getting after it.
He's a hero of mine. He deserves a Nobel Prize. He's absolutely amazing.
So yeah, I don't disagree. He should be lauded much more than he has been. But so you go low carb, higher fat, you start losing weight, probably get into ketosis, I imagine. So how long did you do that, and what was the result of that?
Sure. So I was able to lose a considerable amount of weight, but then I started plateauing really badly, and I started doing a lot more research about nutrition. And then I actually found Carnivore after seeing the success of Michaela Peterson and yourself and some other folks that were on his podcast, and I decided to give that a try. I thought, since low carb works so well with blood sugar management, I thought zero carb would be fantastic. So I did strict carnivore for a year, and I felt absolutely amazing. And it was during that time when I started to pick up weights. I really got serious about weightlifting in addition to running. And I was able to stop the plateau, and I was able to get all the way down to 215, which was a little skinny for me.
215.
Lately, I've decided to put a little bit more weight on. So yeah, and carnivore was absolutely amazing. I had the best blood sugar control. I was able to get my A1Cs under 5% at 5% or less for the last 3 years or so. And it was a fantastic experience.
What was the response to the endocrinologist or whoever's managing your insulin?
They were adamantly against not only carnivore, but adamantly against low carb.
Because why?
Because of all the myths that are out there regarding keto and ketoacidosis. She didn't know the difference between the two. I guess that's what happens when you do flashcard memorization for your MD. She didn't understand that I needed to take insulin. She thought protein was a free food, which was absolutely blew my mind after reading Bernstein and watching all his videos on his YouTube channel. This is basic stuff that I guess is not well known in care team circles. So
yeah, it's shocking that in 2021, a physician doesn't realize that protein has an insulin requirement. It's just amazing to me. So, but she had to have seen you lose 150 pounds and see that your hemoglobin A1C was basically normal. Yep. You have a non-diabetic A1C, and they're still like, oh, this is not good. We'd like you having that. Oh, what happened, by the way? What happened to your neuropathy in your feet? Did that improve at all?
Completely reversed. When I normalized my blood sugar and normalized my A1C, it's totally gone, which is amazing. And that's something else that you don't really know, that you don't learn from your care teams, is that you can reverse a lot of the apathies after normalizing your blood sugar.
Did you have any other things going on? How were your kidneys working? Did you have any retinopathy in your eyes, or what was it?
No. Thank goodness I had no other diabetes complications that I know of. I know there's a lot out there that people have that they may not know of, but all my blood markers are pristine right now. I did have extremely high blood pressure, and I had terrible sleep apnea, which was resolved after I lost all the weight. I remember I had to de-prescribe myself my blood pressure medicine. I remember going on a run around the block, and I started blacking out because I got the really bad low blood pressure. And then I called my doctor, and they're like, "Yeah, we need to get you off of your blood pressure medicine." So that was a great experience.
So you were obviously on the insulin diabetes meds. You're on the blood pressure meds. Any other meds they put you in? They put you like on a GLP-1, or do they put you on any other meds? Sometimes they'll do that with type 1s even. So just blood pressure meds and insulin.
Blood pressure meds and insulin. And I did have a case of atrial fibrillation. Mm-hmm. So I forget the meds, but I'm not taking them anymore, but it was
metoprolol. Beta blocker, for rate control.
What was that? And I don't take that anymore. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's pretty cool. And so obviously the physician's fairly clueless about eating as a diabetic, or at least not understanding the nuances of low carb eating. So you lost all the weight, you got skinny, you may even skinnier than you wanted to be. You're probably pretty ripped. I imagine at 215. I don't know how tall you are.
Yeah.
But
6'3".
6'3", so 6'3", 215. That's pretty thin. I don't know. I prefer a little more muscle, a little meat on the bones.
I do too.
All right. So obviously Carnivore was helpful. Low carb got you rolling, got you off the insulin nightmare roller coaster. You you obviously improved things. Because you got to get your insulin from somewhere, right? You still need a physician. Are they still like, we disagree with the way you're eating, or do you just ignore?
Right now, I just ignore what they say. I'm the best controlled patient by far in her practice. And if she's going to have disagreements with my diet, then I'm just not going to pay attention to her. I got this one thing I did learn from the Dykman videos and the Bernstein groups and the grit groups. You have to be your own self-advocate, and you have to learn how to stand up to your doctor if you know that they're wrong. And after living this for 27 years, I've felt the best I've ever felt in my entire life right now. So.
Well, yeah, but if they're right, then you being 400 pounds with sleep apnea, hypertensive, and with roller coaster blood glucose is their version of being right, which clearly it seems bizarre. So let me ask you about, you'd mentioned, I think, correct me whatever, I think now maybe you're doing more of this satiety per calorie type approach, where it's maybe not a strict carnivore, probably still eating a lot of meat, I imagine. Yes. What was that? Did that just do with just more protein for muscle and stuff like that? What's the story on that?
Yeah. So satiety per calorie is something that I'm really interested in. I'm basically still carnivore. Mm-hmm. I'd say 90% of my calories come from animal sources, and then I eat a little bit of low carb fruit and vegetable. The satiety per calorie, what I do is I just scale back the fat a little bit and the carbs a little bit if I want to cut back on the weight. If I want to put weight on, then I'll maybe increase the fat a little bit. But basically I want to prioritize protein as much as possible. And the low carb, high protein diet that I eat, low carb or high protein is just as important as the low carb. And something that I really follow with satiety per calorie, some folks that I've really been interested in are Ted Naiman, Dr. E, and Marty Kendall. Mm-hmm. Those are some folks that I've been reading.
I know all those guys. We've had multiple discussions with those guys. I don't disagree with the premise. They'll say carnivore is a really good satiety per calorie. It fits in with that paradigm, and it's funny. I look at those guys through my lens, and they look at me through their lens, and it's like they overlap. And it's like I guess one of the things with satiety per calorie that that I see from my particular, the people that I treat, people with autoimmune disease, sometimes these high satiety per calorie foods still might be a problem for them, particularly if they're ultra processed, and there are some quote unquote ultra processed high satiety foods that still might be an issue for people. So you just have to depend on who your audience is. But I think in general,
I'll always say that the healthiest food you can eat is eggs and beef.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think they would generally align with that. They would say, it's satiety per calorie like 50, 55, 60, which is what they recommend you live at. No one's living at a diet of 99, which would be unsustainable for most people, because you would just
right. And if you want to eat, and if you want to eat eggs for breakfast and you're trying to lose weight, eat 6 eggs, 2 whole eggs, and then like 4 egg whites.
Yeah.
That's just an example of you can scale things back a little bit.
Let's talk a little about, so with Bernstein, he's often recommending regular insulin as opposed to the rapid acting, which is more tailored to carbohydrate consumption. Mm-hmm. You said you have a pump, and I don't know how compatible that is with regular insulin. How do you manage your insulin now? So I guess that's it.
So I use a tandem insulin pump with Control IQ, which is kind
So
of
what that device is, what are you showing me there? That's the actual pump, or what is that?
this is my insulin pump. So this communicates with my Dexcom CGM, and it will automatically adjust my insulin
So
doses.
that's a
Throughout the
closed
day.
loop thing. So obviously, how's it attached to your body? Is it on the surface of the skin? Is it
Sure.
okay? So you just
Yeah, it's attached with a needle into my skin, and it's attached with some glue, so it communicates with my Dexcom G7, and it adjusts my basal rate throughout the day to try to keep me at my target level. And something that I do that not many other type 1s do that I'm really aware of is I will also use our insulin to bolus for my high protein, low carb meals.
so that's through a pen. Is that a pen basically?
I use just a vial and an insulin needle. I don't use pens.
Okay, so you go to like you got Walmart style. Maybe you go to Walmart and pick up
Twice a year, I go to Walmart. It's great. It's like $20 or $25 for a vial of insulin. You don't need a prescription. You just walk right in, walk right out.
Yeah. And so I guess the question is, do you have a difficulty with sports and athletic and working out with that thing hanging off you? Do you worry about that thing getting bumped around? I can't imagine like you could do jiu-jitsu or something like that if you had that thing hanging on you.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu would be tough, but the sports that I do now, I do lots and lots of weightlifting, and I do running, and it doesn't really get in the way. But if I did do like physical contact sports like jiu-jitsu or something like that, I would probably have to rethink my strategy. I've seen other people I think Tandem's got like the Mobi, which is a lot smaller and a lot more compact. But yeah.
Okay.
No issues here.
And so you said you went from 200 units a day to now 50. So you've quartered your insulin requirement, 40. So you cut it by out of 20%, what you used to be using. Obviously, you're a little bit smaller. And there's data out there that shows that diabetics that utilize a lot of insulin twice the cancer risk and so on. So that's just alone that fact alone. Plus, you probably have more stable. You have less hypoglycemias. I mean, how often do you have these hypoglycemias? Probably almost never.
It's not very often. Yeah. And the hypos that I get, it'll drift down into like the 60s and 70s, and I'll just take a little bit of glucose and it'll drift back up. Whereas before, when I was taking the industrial doses of insulin, I was slamming like 50 to 100 units of rapid acting Novolog to eat the Taco Bell and stuff. You go up from the Taco Bell and then you crash down. You'd have like double arrows down at 60. And that's when you eat the kitchen, you drink the gallon of orange juice, and then you go on a blood sugar roller coaster. So that's basically how most type 1s live their lives.
Yeah.
And that's how I was living my life.
That's awful. That's an awful way to do that. Let's delve in a little about protein, because I don't know what your meal pattern is, but there's data out there that suggests that, like, for instance, protein will stimulate glucagon. Glucagon will cause the liver to break down glycogen and you'll dump blood glucose. So there's a threshold. Like, so some people it's 25 grams, some people it's 50, some people it's a little more, probably based on overall body size. Do you find that do you find any issues around protein, or is it always like that slow response? I give myself 4 or 5 units of R and it covers me, or how does that work for protein with you?
Yeah, so usually when I eat my meals, I'll take a very small micro bolus of rapid acting Novolog. I'm talking like half or less than maybe like a quarter unit. So that'll cover me for like the initial bump, and then I will take maybe like 5 units of R with the needle. And protein does have a very slow blood sugar response profile compared to like carbs, which is like this, and fat is more in the basal. But R is a great thing about Bernstein that I learned from him, is that R is the perfect insulin to cover high protein meals. And I've been able to incorporate that with my insulin regimen, and it covers it really well. But to answer your question, yes, there is a response with protein. If I did not take a bolus, I would end up hyperglycemic and chasing blood sugars. But using the R, it's a lot gentler. You have a gentle curve down, whereas the rapid acting, it's more like this. And that's just another positive aspect of low carb.
What is the range of blood glucose you experience? A lot of times, like, normal is considered between 70 and 140 for a non-diabetic. And with diabetics, they like, well, let's keep it under 180 or under 200, or sometimes.
Sure.
Where do you see your numbers fluctuate at?
Sure. So the American Diabetes Association tells us that we need to stay 70% of the time between, I think, 70 and 180. Mm-hmm. And 180 is more than 2 times greater than normal blood sugar, which is 83. So personally, I try to stay at 83 as often as possible. I know that's not realistic all the time, But if I'm going over like 100, I will take microbolus corrections to make my blood sugar as close to 83 as possible.
Is that something the pump runs for you? Because some of those pumps, I think, are designed not to run lower. You have to hack them or something like that. Is that right?
Yes, that's a huge problem that I've written to Tandem numerous times about. They need to let us choose our own targets. Right now, the target, I run it in sleep mode 24/7, which makes it a little bit tighter. But the target with sleep mode is 110 mg per DL, which is still way too high for me. So what I do is I play with the correction profiles and some of the other algorithms, and I'm able to get the target down below 100 usually. And I've had success with kind of playing with that. So.
Yeah. Okay. And then how does exercise impact this?
Exercise is absolutely critical. I find weightlifting to be a godsend for blood sugar control. It really helps with glucose in your blood. The bigger your muscles, the bigger glucose sink it is, and it makes you more insulin sensitive. So I'm taking less insulin. Sometimes I will go low during an exercise and I'll just correct with some liquid glucose very easily. Other times I may get high and I just monitor my blood sugar as often as I can. I wear a smartwatch so I can get the readings on my watch as often as I want. And my insulin pump will also give me real-time readings. But it's important to always stay on top of your blood sugar and check regularly during exercise.
Yeah, I've worn a CGM before, and sometimes I notice like the highest my blood glucose ever goes is often after intense exercise. If I'm getting it like doing heavy deadlifts or sprinting, because it's such a stressful, cortisone-rich fight or flight type of thing that you're inducing, that you see that little bit of glycogen dump. And so that's interesting to me that. Let's talk about fat for a second. Do you have to bolus or calculate for fat in your diet?
I don't. It's the fat in my diet is taken care of by my pump, the basal rates. If I eat a high fat meal, it's going to be harder to bring my blood sugars down. Like if I eat a high protein, high fat meal, it'll be a little bit stickier, but normally the basal will take over at the tail end when it really hits down the road, but I don't normally bolus for fat.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you're aware. There was a study came out last year. It was looking at basically cadaveric pancreas beta cells. They found a bunch of people that had died, and then they actually harvested their pancreas and they kept their cells alive, and they had the beta cells, which are what produces the insulin, and they exposed them to various macronutrients, and they found that about 9% of people, at least in their group that they found, would actually have a pretty big insulin response to fat. So it's kind of like there's some interesting, like that some people might need more insulin if they're eating more fat than others. And so it's an interesting, because we always traditionally thought that many people say, well, fat has no real impact on insulin. Obviously, guys like Marty Kendall and others would disagree. They'd say, look, we see it as type 1 diabetics. If we don't cover our basal, then we find that our blood glucose isn't in control. So it's more of this. It's not that super sharp rise. It's more of that really slow, steady drifting upwards or something like that.
It'll keep you high, and Marty's absolutely right when he says that. He knows a lot about insulin, as his wife and his son are type 1.
Yeah, and so the question is that directly applicable to people without type 1 diabetes? And the answer is maybe we don't know for sure, because there's obviously other things. I don't think my gut feeling is that type 1 diabetes is not just about insulin not being produced by the beta cells. I think there's probably other things that are going on hormonally or physiologically, and we just focus on the insulin because
it's not just insulin. There's I think 5 or 6 other hormones that it affects with your pancreas, and it affects all kinds of different things.
Yeah, and so because the treatment, this is what happens across the board in medicine, because the medical treatment is insulin, right? So that's what we focus on, and even though there could be other things that are going on, that's one of the reasons why diet is so important, because it also has a multi-factor. So how long did it take, just out of curiosity, when and how long did it take for you to resolve your peripheral neuropathy in your feet? Because people ask me about that all the time, and I've seen it quite a bit, but just for your experience.
2 years. I'd say 2 years.
Oh, okay. So this was after you went high fat or carnivore. When did it go away?
I'd say it went away when I was carnivore. Okay. Yep, because that's when my blood sugars really got under tight control.
And doctor, did you mention that to the endocrinologist? Hey, look, my neuropathy went away. Was that anything that?
Yeah, she didn't say anything. She just moved on.
Interesting. Okay.
In fact, I got more compliments from the medical assistant, the nursing team,
Yeah.
than the endo, because they would notice me losing the weight, and they were like asking me, "Oh, how did you do it? How did you do it?" And I was telling them about carnivore and low carb and all that, and endo just, I don't know, doesn't care.
Interesting. Yeah, it seemed like, well, anyway, I fight this battle every day, but that's okay. We'll get them one at a time. As far as, this is the other thing, you mentioned insulin resistance. And what we see a lot of times, obviously a type 1 that's untreated gets skinny and dies. That's the reality of type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, particularly late stage, as they become more and more insulin resistant, they get this really classic big old belly, kind of fat through the midsection, real skinny arms and legs. So their muscle mass is all catabolized and it turns into fat. And obviously that is associated with insulin resistance. And so you are now, I would say you are arguably insulin sensitive because you got muscle now. And so it doesn't make sense to say you're insulin resistant when you're obviously, your muscles are responding to insulin, right? You're putting on muscle.
Right. I'm the most insulin sensitive I've ever been in my life. But when I was 400 pounds, I actually had double diabetes. That's something I learned, because type 1s can become type 2. Yeah. And taking 210 units of insulin a day, that's absolutely nuts looking back. And I was able to resolve that.
What do you do for a living, by the way?
I do management for an IT company.
Okay. And then when you were 400 pounds, damn near half dead, what were you doing then? How was that going?
It was, I was still in the same position, but it was miserable. I had no energy. I surfed the couch all the time. I was eating crap, just watching TV. I didn't exercise at all. I had no motivation to do anything. It was not a life that was very fun to live. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I'm sure. Family has had to notice. Your coworkers have had to notice. So what's been a response with that group?
I get asked all the time how to do it. I tell them, I think the biggest thing is when you start, your motivation is super high to get healthy, but the key is to make it a habit, to keep eating the right way and exercising every day, make it a habit. And it becomes part of, you need high discipline to make it work. But basically I tell them these days, you need to cut back. If you want to get healthy and thin, you need to lift weights and you need to cut back the carbs and the fat and increase the protein through the roof. Eat as much protein as you can. And that's really the key to health for many people, especially those with type 2 diabetes.
So I will just say that there are some type 2 diabetics, and it may, obviously, I think exercise is a variable that we have to realize that if they increase their protein quite a bit, they sometimes see blood glucose numbers a little bit higher, and perhaps they're not putting that protein to structural use, and it's becoming converted to either ketones or glucose, depending on which amino acid it is. And so how much protein are you eating today as a 200? Because we're about to say, I think this morning I woke up, I was 252. So we're about the same size. And I know what I eat, but what do you eat daily on a protein basis?
Well, you're taller than me, but yeah. In a day, I've actually measured my protein percentage, and lately I've been over 50% protein.
But how many grams is that? Because that depends on how much food you're eating.
Over the last year, I track everything I eat. Over the last year, I've been averaging 415 grams of protein per day.
415 grams of protein. Yeah, that's like 3 pounds of steak and 10
3 pounds of chicken or so.
Yeah, 3 pounds of chicken or so. Yeah, what is the meat you're eating? Are you eating a lot of leaner chicken stuff?
I eat lots of lean.
Yeah, okay.
I eat lots of lean ground beef. Mm-hmm. That's my favorite. I eat egg whites. I eat like a big carton of egg whites for breakfast every day with a little bit of salsa. Mm-hmm. I'll eat a lot of chicken breasts, turkey. I have a smoker and I love smoking meats on my smoker. So I like to cook brisket. I do top round, which is a little bit leaner. I put that on the smoker too. But basically anything from the sea is great. Fish. Anything that just lean meats.
Yeah. So you said about 50% of your calories are coming from protein, and the other 50% is coming from mostly fat and some carbohydrate. Then is that?
That's correct. Yeah. Yep.
How is your hunger? How's your appetite?
It's very well controlled. I don't snack. I have 3 or 4 distinct meals. I'll usually eat my first meal like around 11, 12 o'clock, and then I'll get home before I start lifting. I'll have a small meal. And then I'll have a dinner, and then before bed, I might have something like a couple of cheese sticks or something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, it's 4 distinct meals. I don't snack.
Okay. And so how Are you eating mostly at home then? Or do you eat it out at work or something, or do you work from home?
I go into the office and I do work from home occasionally, but all the food I eat, I'd say 95% of the food I eat is stuff that I prepare. I'm really weird about food just because being a type 1 and just eating the way I do. I don't really like eating out too much because I don't know a lot what they put in it, unless of course it's a big juicy steak or something like that, then I'll eat that. But usually the food that they have at the office, it's like pizzas and deli sandwiches and chips and stuff like that. I'd rather just fast than eat that stuff. But I'm always, one of the keys to success for me is always being prepared with meals. So I'll always do meal prep every day.
Yeah. And so, certainly that's just cheap garbage food, cheap carbohydrates, what we often see, because it's just a cheap way to get people fed, not necessarily nourish them very well. What about things like protein powders? Have you done that? Because some folks, because the surface area is so small that a lot of people will see protein will almost act like protein powder, will almost behave like a carbohydrate if it's naked. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I rarely have protein powder unless my floor for protein is 215 grams per day. I have no problem hitting that. But if I ever was at risk of not hitting that, then I would slam a protein shake. And I always do just plain unflavored whey. And when I do have the whey, it does spike my blood sugar just because it hits your bloodstream so fast. So,
hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up, though. Our spaces are filling up very quickly. Yeah, that's the one thing, like with type 1s or diabetics in general, that's one of the concerns around whey protein, particularly if it's not somehow slowed down with fat or something to keep it from just, because it turns into, it literally acts like a carbohydrate for a lot of people. It's such a quick, rapid onset of digestion with that. How's your strength? You getting stronger? What's been going on? Obviously, when you got to 400 pounds, you probably had some muscle mass underneath there because you had to just walk around and carry that around. So have you?
Yeah. But it wasn't healthy muscle. It was definitely more ribeye than like a top round or whatever.
Tenderloin or something like that.
Tenderloin. Yes. It was more ribeye than tenderloin, but I definitely had muscle mass. These days, lifting weights is a passion of mine. During COVID, I built a gym in my basement, so I have no obstacles to getting to the gym. It's the highlight of my day. I'll finish my day, get my kids fed, go down to my basement, spend an hour and a half, 2 hours down there. I do push-pull legs these days. And then on my off days, I'll do some walking just to get my steps up. But strength has gone up considerably over the years. And I try to do progressive overload each week just to get stronger and stronger.
Yeah, nothing wrong with getting stronger. That's something. I'm almost 60 now, and I still think it's great to see it.
Well, I've seen the way you train, Dr. Baker, and you are absolutely awesome.
Well, like lately, I'm really focusing on getting faster. So it's a lot of high output sprinting stuff like that. So that'll be my focus as I get into my 60s, and so it'll still be pretty strong. And that's important there. So, what about you mentioned walking? Do you strategically use walking to help with blood glucose management at home? Do you ever think about that, like after a meal or something like that?
Yep. If I ever have high blood sugar, nothing gets it down faster than going on a quick walk. I do have a treadmill in my basement because it's winter now, so it's not as enjoyable to walk outside. But walking it uses the GLUT4 transporters, so it can actually suck the glucose out of your bloodstream without using insulin. So that's a great way to get your blood sugar down without having to use extra insulin. So
yeah, some people may not realize it, but we do have non-insulin dependent glucose transporters in our body, and exercise is a pretty reliable way to do that. And I think I've looked at this stuff over the years. It's like minimum 10 minutes, and there's a certain amount of effort that's required to actually stimulate the muscles and stuff like that. So how about it's sleeping? You think that that little basal thing just nights you never have lows and highs at night. It's pretty steady overnight.
It's really steady, and I think that's one of the keys to success for getting a low A1C is being able to go through the night with a normal blood sugar, because a lot of type 1s, they're terrified of getting hypos at night. And I know I was, because that's usually when I got my seizure hypos back in the day when I was not as healthy. So they'll try to run higher during the night. And if you're spending a third of your day higher than you'd like to, then that's going to reflect in your A1C.
Yeah, of course it
So
is.
eating low carb and getting the exercise in is critical for getting normal blood sugars throughout the night. So
Let's see. Let's talk about fasting. You mentioned you fast. Okay, do you fast much? What's the story around that?
So, yeah, I've done a complete 180 on my views of extended fasting. When I started getting healthy, I fell into the whole Fung camp.
Mm-hmm.
I read all his books and everything like that. And then I bought into the whole carbohydrate insulin model, all that. I've evolved my views on all that. Now, my goals are muscle protein synthesis. And I understand that our bodies have the ability to store carbs. Our bodies have the ability to store fat. But our bodies really don't have the ability to store protein. And if your goal is to build muscle, you need to keep feeding it aminos on a regular basis. And if you fast regularly, greater than 18, 24 hours, then you're going to start breaking down lean tissue potentially. And that's something I want to avoid. So these days, I may do some intermittent fasting, like I won't eat until like 11 or 12, but that's where I draw the line. So.
And it could be interesting because, when you're 400 pounds, it might be that the fasting model had more relevance. But now that you're lean, your goal is to put on muscle, it becomes counterproductive in many ways. I'm the same way. Yes. I don't really fast. Occasionally, if I'm on a plane on a long trip, I just don't eat their garbage. And plus, I'm just sitting on my ass. I'm just sitting here. I'm not even doing nothing. I don't need to eat because they always offer you, here's your little biscotti cookie. Oh, yeah, do you want some sun chips? No, I don't want any of that crap. Thanks. I don't say. I just politely say no, thank you. But I'm thinking about
the longest I ever went. Yeah. I went 7 days without eating once, and that was quite an experience.
48 hours is the longest I ever did. And years ago, I interviewed this Cole Robinson snake diet dude, and he convinced me to try 48. And I said, "What do you got to do?" And he said, "Well, just eat what you normally eat in 2 days in one meal, and then just fast." And I said, "Okay." So that was like 8 pounds. I ate like 8 pounds of food, 8 pounds of meat in one setting, and I literally couldn't move. I had to go lay on the couch for like 4 hours, and then I didn't eat for 2 days. I didn't feel like it, but then I was like, "This sucks. I don't want to do this."
Exactly. No. Yeah. When the bad thing about breaking your fast is normally you go to the foods that aren't the most healthy for you. So
I just eat steak. So
yeah, you can't.
But I mean, somebody else would have an issue with that. So let's see what else. What are the other things? Because obviously, diabetes, type 1 or type 2, nutrition is critical. It's a huge part. It's probably one of the most essential parts there. Yep. What other things are valuable to you? We talked about lifting. We talked about sleep. Are there any other things, any other practices that you notice?
Yeah, I would say the diet is number one. I'd say using the right insulin management techniques, that's way up there. I really want to emphasize strength training, building muscle for all diabetics. All type 1s should be as lean and jacked as possible. Same with type 2s. If you're watching this and you're a type 1 or type 2, I strongly recommend that you go and watch the Dr. Bernstein videos and try to join the GRIT community. They are in a class by themselves. It's the healthiest cohort of type 1s anywhere in the world. And that's really how I got my start. I would just say be a student of nutrition and metabolism. Type 1s are experts in metabolism because they can see instantly what foods or even stressors will do to their blood sugar. So you can modify how you live your life to optimize things.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the stress thing because there's stress hyperglycemia, which I'm sure you're familiar with. You get a cold or something like that, your blood glucose is hard to control. Is that something? Yes. And like if you get, I don't know how often you get sick, but if you get like a pretty bad cold, it's sometimes hard to get your blood glucose down. I think there's some reasons for that physiologically. In fact, it may be normal that our blood glucose goes higher because it helps the immune system during that stressful period. But how do you, because some people just like they're slamming insulin trying to get their blood glucose down and won't go down. Have you ever experienced that?
Since I've been healthy, I really haven't been too sick, but yeah, people definitely have out of control blood sugars when they're sick. That's hard to bring down. Your insulin needs change from day to day, week to week, as you gain and lose weight, if you're sick or not. So that's something that is also advantageous about having an insulin pump, as it'll automatically adjust your basal rates. But yeah, you have to be on your toes at all times, 24/7, 365 disease. So
and it's like, particularly if you don't have a pump, you got to be a pancreas, and that's a lot of work, man. It's just like it's like if you didn't have if your lungs required conscious control and you had to breathe on your own, you had to tell yourself to breathe all the time. And when I'm
Right.
excited, breathe more, and I'm actually that'd be exhausting and can be exhausting dealing with alarms going off all the time and dosing, and it's almost like a full-time job, isn't it?
It is.
So stress, get in a fight with your wife, whatever, something bad happens at work, you're in a car wreck, shit happens basically. How do you deal with stress? It's interesting because as I'm delving more into athletic performance, I know there's some breathing stuff that can help with the parasympathetic nervous system. And do you do any of that? Do you have any stress management techniques, and does that impact your blood glucose?
Stress management techniques. I tell you what, when I wasn't healthy, I definitely didn't have any stress management techniques. My technique was to hit the bag of potato chips and the Cheez-Its. These days, I keep in a routine with my diet and my exercise. My weightlifting is my stress management technique. I can get a lot of demons out in the weight room, slamming things around. There's nothing better. If I have a bad day, it's not going to bother me. I have avenues where I can take care of that. That's why I think that's another reason why I think weight training is so important.
Yeah, you mentioned slamming because it's interesting. Because I slam stuff, I throw stuff, I do snatches and cleans, and I lift with a lot of momentum and velocity sometimes because I'm trying to be performance based, not so much bodybuilding.
Right. Power.
And that because people are out there, well, you need to do your curls real slow and do the mind muscle connection. I'm like, I'm not interested in bodybuilding. I'm interested in getting after it and performance. And so there's a different style for that. And people that train track and field athletes and athletes know that there's a difference from bodybuilding. And a lot of people don't understand that. But do you find, like, what kind of stuff do you do in the gym? Are you squat, bench, deadlift? Are you throwing stuff around too? Or what are you doing?
I try to do hypertrophy training. I do push-pull legs. I do squats, deadlifts. I love deadlifts, bench press, and then I do the isolated movements. But normally I use cables, free weights, and dumbbells.
So a lot of squeezing of the muscles and stuff like that. Yeah.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah, what I was going to say, I'm looking into some of these sprint athletes and sprint coaches, and one of them is talking about this concept called RPR, reflex performance reset, and it's basically just a bunch of belly breathing and some pressure points, and it supposedly puts you in a parasympathetic mode. But that that diaphragmatic breathing, believe it or not, has a lot of literature to support it, that it lowers A1C, that it either acutely and chronically, that people that engage in regular, just deep belly breathing, where you just inhale and let your belly come out and blow it back out through your mouth. And so it's an interesting, just little, and it's not as important as what you eat. What you eat is going to be most important, but it's another one of those just little small variables. I don't know if you saw, you as a diabetic, you probably notice or see some of this stuff. Study recently came out, red light therapy can show lower A1C. Your A1C is already 4 something, so you're like, I'm already good. But do you play with any of that weird stuff, that kind of like those little add-on things?
I don't know. Yeah, the biggest rocks in the jar for me are diet and exercise, and
as it would be for most people. Yeah, for sure.
I can totally see how the breathing would potentially bring or help your blood sugars, because anything that reduces the cortisol makes you maybe a little bit more insulin sensitive. I can absolutely see that. So
yeah, well, like I said, I've sometimes I'll wear a CGM, and I've tried it, and I think it's kind of like, it's not like it's going to drop 50 points just because you take a few breaths, but you see it kind of like maybe going down 3-4 points or something. I don't know. You could. When I was rowing, one of the Olympic gold medalists that I trained with was talking to me about breathing and heart rate. 'Cause I wore a heart rate monitor, and he said you can actually lower your heart rate through breathing and some of that stuff. And then I was like, I just want to pull as hard as I can. I don't care about that stuff because I'm
right.
Anyway, so, but for distance stuff, it made bigger difference there. So, do you, obviously the American Diabetes Association is just stupid. I mean, they got the stupid advice. They're just not helping people.
It's unfortunate.
I was in Oklahoma a couple months ago giving a presentation to the Oklahoma legislature about diabetes and perhaps getting a study using carnivore versus diabetes, which I think would be a wonderful thing, and hopefully that'll happen. And they had a diabetic nurse educator coming in there. They had her as like, what is diabetes? Why is it a problem? But she was bragging on how good they've done for diabetics with their standard model. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Your target is, like you said, your target is my feet go numb. And it's like 6 is not good, 6 to 7. And the American College of, I think it was the American College of Physicians and Surgeons even suggested between 7 and 8 as a target, because it's too hard to get under 7. 7, 8's good. That's like chopping off toes level. It's just like, what the hell are you guys doing here? So anyway.
Yeah, the research shows very clearly that the moment we leave optimal blood sugars, our risk for the complications, macro and micro complications, dramatically increase.
And like I said, you may like this is a thing that I think is a really important concept here, because, and I know Dave Dykman has shown these things, but you can have a reasonable A1C 6, which most endocrinologists say, hey, good job, but it could be all over the place, and it's just averaging out. It's hypos, hypers all day long. I assume you got a pretty smooth looking profile now.
Yeah, my standard deviation's around 20. And before I got healthy, my standard deviation was probably around 100. Yeah. So that will tell you something, how out of control it was.
So you're swinging. And it's not just the fact that the number looks better, because how do you feel when you're going up real quick and going down real quick? I can feel it when I'm over like 110, 120. I just feel off. And then you have type 1s out there that are spending all day at like 180, 200, 300. You just can't imagine how they feel, especially the kids that can't necessarily verbalize how they feel. Yeah, kids traditionally have really crappy control, particularly teenagers and type 1 diabetic, because they're eating with their friends, and their friends are eating garbage, and it's like sodas and junk food, and what's inconvenient to be dosing all the time. Maybe if they have a pump, it might be better. How, from the pump standpoint, I've seen, I don't know, they've got some other things, I can't recall them, some kind of pod thing where it's maybe more temporary, doesn't have that big thing hanging out. Are there other pump options out there that you think would be worth trying?
Yeah, Omnipod. They have something. There's a new pump coming out called Sequel Twist. That's going to be released later this year. I think they're going to use a more aggressive algorithm to keep targets lower. But I love Tandem. If they were able to reduce their target to 83, where I'd like to keep it, it would be the perfect pump. Otherwise, we have to play with the algorithms and use gimmicks to try to get normal blood sugars. So, but there are other options. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, we got a couple minutes left. Social media, are you doing that stuff? Are you in there? You raising the alarm on social media, or do you just kind of keep?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm on Twitter. I I post my A1Cs every month and just my progress with my health for the past year, a couple of years or so. I'm on there raising the alarm about ADA a lot. Sometimes just some of the nonsense that they're publishing, like those horrible recipes and the ridiculous targets and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you and it's Ryan. God, Ryan's last name, I'm blanking on it right now.
Dr. Attar.
Yeah, Ryan Attar. Yeah, he's always, because I interviewed him a while ago, he's always sending me like, look at the ADA. It's like, here's a recipe for whatever, and it's a bunch of sugar and flour and crap. And it's like,
I remember they had a cucumber salad and they put like half a cup of sugar in it, and they published it. Yeah. It's like, what are you thinking?
Just put a damn steak on there. You don't need to add sugar to that. It tastes good. Anyway, all right. Well, so what is do you mind sharing your Twitter handle if we're X handle?
Sure. It is Mike Fitz.
Mike Fitz
on Twitter.
Okay. At Twitter. Okay. Or actually we'll call it X now. So, well, awesome. X. Well, congratulations. You've got to feel younger. You probably
I'm aging in reverse.
You've reversed your age and stuff like that. Goals for the upcoming year or in a couple of years? Any strength goals or fitness goals or whatever career goals?
I just want to keep building strength. I've shifted away from running. I used to do a lot of running. I shifted away from that because it's more catabolic. I want to build myself up more. Just keep researching nutrition and keep trying to help others that are suffering with type 1 diabetes.
Favorite food? What's your favorite food?
Favorite food is definitely ribeye steak. Yeah. I would say that. Or brisket, smoked brisket on my smoker.
Yeah, you can't beat those things. Yeah, a little salt, pepper, smoking on there, 16 hours. Yep. It melts like butter. Oof. Awesome. Mike, thanks for doing this, man. Appreciate it. Good luck to you. Keep inspiring people. Keep fighting a good fight. I know I'm in the trenches with you, and so, like I said, I think we can start to change things. So I think we're there. We're getting there. So it's good.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Baker.
All right, man. Appreciate it.